And first up, new revelations involving Russia and the US investigation into its meddling in the 2016 presidential election.
Sources tell CNN Russian officials discussed having potentially derogatory information about Donald Trump and his aides in conversations intercepted by the US last year. Now, this news coming as the White House fields new questions about senior advisor Jared Kushner and his contacts with Russian officials. Let's head out to Washington now, and our Jessica Schneider standing by with the very latest. Hi there, Jessica.
Hi, Amber and Michael. You know, we're learning from several sources that Russian officials did claim to have that derogatory information about then-candidate Donald Trump. This is from multiple sources, including 2 former intelligence officials, as well as a former congressional official as well. So we know that this information came out. It was detected on intercepts from the intelligence community. And one source is telling CNN tonight that those potentially derogatory details were financial in nature.
The conversations were picked up by U.S. intelligence and showed that the Russians believed they had the ability to influence the administration through the derogatory information. But the sources warned the Russian claims could have been exaggerated or even made up as part of the disinformation campaign they carried out throughout the election. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper says intelligence agencies were monitoring many conversations between Russian officials.
I will just say that there were a series of communications and dialogues that we grew, I say we, the members of the intelligence community that were aware of this, were very concerned about.
This as the White House fends off questions about reports that Jared Kushner pursued a secret communication channel with Russian officials. The FBI is now scrutinizing the meetings between Kushner and Russians, according to a U.S. official. On December 1st, Kushner met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak at Trump Tower. In mid-December, Kislyak told Kushner to meet with the chairman of the U.S.-sanctioned VEB Bank, Sergei Gorkov, who has close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. When the meeting was disclosed in March, VEB said the meeting was part of a, quote, business roadshow. The White House instead insisted it was part of Kushner's role during the transition. Now, sources defending Kushner say his meetings with Ambassador Kislyak were to discuss military strategy in Syria, and the talks involved former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
You're asking if he approves of an action that is not a confirmed action. That being said, I think Secretary Kelly and General McMaster have both discussed that in general terms, back channels are an appropriate part of diplomacy.
It's still unclear whether President Trump knew Kushner was establishing that secret channel.
I'm not going to get into what the president did or did not discuss.
Senator John McCain says either way, the secret communications weren't appropriate.
My view of it is I don't like it. I just don't. I know that some administration officials are saying, well, that's standard procedure. I don't think it's standard procedure prior to the inauguration of a president of the United States by someone who is not in an appointed position.
Reuters reports that Kushner also had 2 previously undisclosed phone calls with Russian Ambassador Kislyak in April and November 2016. Reuters got information about the calls from 7 current and former U.S. officials. But Kushner's attorney countered in a statement. Mr. Kushner participated in thousands of calls in this time period. He has no recollection of the calls as described. We have asked Reuters for the dates of such alleged calls so we may look into it and respond, but we have not received such information. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is refusing to cooperate with the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, which called on him to hand over information and appear. Cohen called the request poorly phrased, overly broad, and not capable of being answered. Cohen is the second Trump associate to deny a request from congressional investigators. Michael Flynn refused to comply with a Senate subpoena and a House request last week through his lawyer. And right now, Senate investigators are waiting on a response from Michael Flynn on a second round of subpoenas they issued. Those are the subpoenas that targeted the records from his 2 businesses. We've also learned that the House Intelligence Committee has requested information from former White House press official Boris Epshteyn. His attorney saying that it was a broad request for information and that the attorney has reached out to the committee for clarification to see if Mr. Epshteyn is able to actually provide the information that was requested. Amber and Michael?
All right, Jessica, great reporting there. Jessica Schneider for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Russia, meantime, is expressing its concern over the lack of progress in U.S. and Russia relations, with one official saying Moscow has seen no serious breakthrough with the Trump administration. Our Claire Sebastian has details now from Moscow.
President Donald Trump's assessment that the Russians must be laughing at the U.S. couldn't be further from the truth tonight in Moscow. There's real concern mounting here that the hoped-for improvement in relations with the U.S. is just not materializing. And that was expressed very clearly today by Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, who said that despite Russia's willingness to revitalize this relationship, they are not seeing any serious breakthrough yet, and that is concerning. He also slammed the recent reports about Russia's ambassador to Washington, Sergei Kislyak, saying that this ongoing defamation of him is causing indignation in Moscow. And it wasn't just the U.S. in Russia's sights today after Emmanuel Macron, France's president, labeled Russian news outlets RT and Sputnik, quote, agents of influence. This was the reaction today from Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov.
I think that these assessments reflect the well-known momentum of the anti-Russian campaign, which the Obama administration has unleashed and which has since took over a number of other countries, including European countries. And our Western partners cannot get out of the way of this momentum. However, there are no facts.
So Russia's message today, it is willing to work with the US and Europe. It's just not sure the feeling is mutual. Claire Sebastian, CNN, Moscow.
Meanwhile, another key member of President Trump's inner circle is out. The White House Communications Director, Mike Dubke, is leaving the administration.
He refused to say why, citing personal reasons, but it's also raising questions about a possible staffing reshuffle at the White House. And appears to be the latest evidence of a White House in turmoil. Jim Acosta has more.
Michael and Amber, the White House finally held an on-camera briefing after steering clear of the cameras on the president's foreign trip. But White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer didn't offer much information to reporters, refusing to say much about Jared Kushner being swept up in the Russia investigation, and insisting the president is happy with the message coming out of the White House on the same day the communications director announced he's stepping down.
It was back to the briefing room for White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. And as is often the case in a Spicer briefing, the back and forth over the Russia investigation was especially intense.
He didn't know at the time. When did he find out?
I think that assumes a lot.
Consider Spicer's response when asked if the president knew about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's apparent attempt to establish a back channel with the Kremlin using Russian facilities. Spicer didn't deny it.
Did the president discuss it?
I'm not going to get into what the president did or did not discuss.
Does he approve of that action?
You're asking if he approves of an action that is not a confirmed action. That being said, I think Secretary Kelly and General McMaster have both discussed that in general terms, back channels are an appropriate part of diplomacy.
The president made clear his frustrations with the Russia investigation in a tweet. Russian officials must be laughing at the U.S. and how a lame excuse for why the Dems lost the election has taken over the fake news.
Say Mr. Trump's pit bull.
Another familiar face from Trump world has surfaced in the Russia probe. The president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, who's been asked to provide testimony and information to congressional investigators. Cohen told CNN he won't be cooperating, adding, quote, they have yet to produce one single piece of credible evidence that would corroborate the Russia narrative. The White House is now in the process of ramping up its rapid response efforts in the Russia investigation and may bring on former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski to help with damage control. That's happening as White House Communications Director Michael Dubke is leaving the West Wing. Despite all that, Spicer insisted the president is happy with his team and then took a jab at the news media.
I think he's very pleased with the work of his staff. I think that he is frustrated, like I am and like so many others, to see stories come out that are patently false, to see narratives that are wrong, to see quote-unquote fake news. When you see stories get perpetrated that are absolutely false, that are not based in fact, that is troubling. And he's rightly concerned.
Can you give an example of fake news, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. I'll give you an example.
Spicer's only example, an erroneous tweet that the president wasn't listening to the translation at the G7 when he really was.
That's the kind of thing that the BBC and ultimately the reporter who's now joining the New York Times push out and perpetuate with no apology. What, you're shaking your head, Peter. I mean, it's true.
But Spicer refused to say whether reports on an impending White House staff shakeup are true. The White House is not backing down from criticism the president leveled at European leaders during his overseas trip. In fact, the president tweeted, we have a massive trade deficit with Germany, plus they pay far less than they should on NATO and military. Very bad for U.S. German Chancellor Angela Merkel sounded gloomy after the president's trip.
The times when we could completely rely on others are, to an extent, over. I've experienced this in the last few days, and that's why we Europeans must really take our fate into our own hands.
Spicer didn't see it that way.
I think the relationship that the president has had with Merkel, he would describe as fairly unbelievable. They get along very well. He has a lot of respect for her. They continue to grow the bond that they had during their talks in the G7.
There were other questions to be asked, but Spicer abruptly ended the briefing.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
On a normal day, the White House confirmation that the president is re-examining the Obama administration's policy toward Cuba would be major news. But bogged down on the Russia investigation, the White House refusal to provide many answers on that question of Russia just maybe refueling the very story the president would like to see go away. Michael and Amara.
And our thanks to Jim Acosta there. A lot to process. CNN political commentator Ryan Lizzer is a Washington correspondent for The New Yorker. He comes to us from New York. Always a pleasure to see you, sir. You know, it was interesting, Sean Spicer today going through virtually every day of that overseas trip and reciting it in glowing terms. I mean, we haven't had a chance to speak. What did you make of what happened, particularly at NATO? Because, you know, Vladimir Putin has wanted to undermine NATO forever. Is he getting his wish?
Yeah, well, first of all, glowing terms. I thought you were referring to the orb that he touched with the Saudis there for a second, Michael. Look, you know, it has been policy of first the Soviet Union and now Russia since the end of World War II to split the United States from Germany, right? The Russians have always known that if they could pull Germany away from us, it's in their strategic interest, and that's been a long-time goal. And frankly, the United States has had some rough patches with Germany, both in the George W. Bush era, where there was a big divide over the Iraq War, and then even in the Obama years, there was some difficult points, including when it was learned through Edward Snowden that the United States had hacked and listened into Angela Merkel's cell phone conversations. But nothing like what Trump, instead of repairing that, Trump has sort of gone out of his way to use Germany as a boogeyman and to use NATO of all institutions. I mean, frankly, the United States gets so much more out of NATO than we put in. And so it's a pretty serious development. Trump, for some reason, has sees Germany and NATO as an antagonist and something that he frequently attacks during the campaign and as president, and sees Russia much more as someone who he wants the United States to get along with better and as an ally, and it's very puzzling.
It's puzzling, and it's really extraordinary to see, you know, even this tit for tat via Twitter, you know, and President Trump, you know, going after Germany again on trade relations, and then Angela Merkel talking about how we cannot completely rely on traditional allies anymore, obviously, after, you know, what she saw at the NATO meeting. But, you know, back to the Russia investigation, because this is what President Trump came home to. He wasn't able to escape it for long, and a lot of stuff swirling around his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. You wrote about this in The New Yorker and what we should know about him. Our international audience, obviously, you know, getting these drips and pieces of information on this very confusing and complex investigation. What should we know about Jared Kushner?
The first thing you should know is he is probably the most important person in the White House, except for the president and arguably the vice president. There's no more important staffer in the Trump White House than Jared Kushner. On the campaign and in the Trump White House, there was one person that if you crossed, you were gone, and that is Jared. The various campaign managers that Trump went through, he went through them because they eventually ran afoul of Jared Kushner. A recent deputy chief of staff that left the Trump White House, she ran afoul of Jared Kushner. It's one reason she departed. So he's also got a massive portfolio. He is literally in charge of Middle East peace. He's one of the very important voices on climate change. He's actually more in the Democratic camp on climate change, believes climate change is happening and wants to do something about it. He has been given a portfolio to help make government more streamlined, various foreign policy issues, including relationship with China and Russia. And he's a 36-year-old real estate developer who married into the Trump family. So it's an unusually large and powerful position for such someone so new to politics.
And somebody who has such a portfolio, as you say, who we never hear from, who never
I
comes
find
out.
that mind-boggling, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've covered the campaign. I cover this White House. You can't find if you can find in all of the great resources of CNN and CNN International, if you can find a clip of Jared Kushner talking to reporters, you would it would be a major effort.
What does his voice sound like?
Exactly. A lot of people say, what does his voice sound like? Because they've never heard him speak. I wanted to ask you, how much trouble do you think he is in? Because the Kushner story, interestingly, was not actually denied by Sean Spicer today. And the question, if the allegations are true, remains. Why are you wanting to go into a Russian facility to have communications with the Russians?
It's very unusual. I remember when the story broke on Friday night, we were all being very cautious. Are the Russians lying about this? We need to hear the White House's side of the story. We need to hear Kushner's side of the story. It's now Tuesday, and we still don't have that. We essentially have the White House confirming the broad outlines of it. They would like to push the idea that they were talking about Syria, but they have not responded to the basic question of why was Jared Kushner trying to circumvent, why was he trying to have conversations with Russian officials that could not be picked up by American intelligence? He clearly knew there's a story in the Washington Post previously that said he and Flynn, before this meeting, were told, watch out for this guy Kislyak. He is a serious diplomat. He understands the Russian spy world, and they actually gave them a CIA psychological profile of Kislyak, and they warned them before this meeting, be careful. So that makes it even more puzzling about why they were trying to ignore all of the Obama intelligence officials and trust this person, and then take the extraordinary step, as it's been reported, of exploring whether to use Russian communications to open this channel to Moscow. If you watched over the weekend in some of the political shows in the U.S., a lot of senior former intelligence officials had some really were very troubled by this. The former acting head of the CIA said he couldn't get out of his mind that if one of his agents had done what Kushner did, he would call that espionage.
Yeah.
So a lot to be explained here. We have more questions than answers.
Exactly.
Ryan Lizza, it's great to get you on.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
You're a busy man.
Good to see you both. Ryan.
Always good to see you. All right, we're going to take a short break here on the program. When we come back on CNN Today, the new battleground where soldiers are fighting ISIS. We're talking about the Philippines.
Also, the ISIS bombing in Iraq that targeted children during Ramadan. Stay with us.
We've polished him up, and I'm back on the road with Freddie Brexit. There's no better way to get out and about and discover what the British people are thinking. If we want to get to the heart of the UK election, this is the way to do it. Join me with Freddie Brexit live all this week on CNN.
Russia, a vibrant country with a wealth of history and culture. And now, cashing in on a wealth of business opportunities. In a CNN special, John Defterios explores how the largest country in the world is positioning itself for global growth. Bold moves, complex relationships. From politics to economics, see what makes this country a major player in our world. Marketplace Russia, Sunday on CNN. CNN World Rugby. It's the Sevens World Series for both men and women. We've got the numbers and the names. Follow the rugby action on and off the pitch with CNN's Alex Thomas and Christina McFarlane. We'll bring you match highlights and training tips. Kick off your weekend with CNN World Rugby. Tonight on CNN. In association with DHL. Philippe Chatrier Court is raked and ready for Roland Garros to begin.
I love Paris. It's a magical place.
The best tennis players in the world are finding their feet on the red clay. Can Novak Djokovic extend his reign over Roland Garros? Or will Rafa Nadal take it back and win his 10th French Open crown?
Definitely going to be the player to beat.
Join us at Roland Garros for a Grand Slam edition of Open Courts, Saturday on CNN, in association with Longines.
Welcome back, everyone. The Philippine military carried out a series of airstrikes Tuesday in an effort to regain full control of the southern Philippine city of Marawi.
ISIS-linked terror groups overran that city 8 days ago. More than 100 people killed, tens of thousands of residents having to flee their homes. Fighting between Philippine forces and Islamic militants on the southern island of Mindanao shows no sign of letting up. The Philippine Army says it has regained control of 70% of the city of Marawi, a little more than a week after fighters loyal to the Islamic State overran the city, planting ISIS flags, torching churches and taking several Christian hostages. In a new video posted to social media, a Catholic priest, one of those taken hostage, pleads with President Rodrigo Duterte to end the offensive to save lives. Likely speaking under duress, he warns that Duterte's enemies are willing to die for their religion. Residents of the besieged city have fled by the tens of thousands to escape the bloodshed.
It's the time of Ramadan, and we should be celebrating with our families. Instead, many people have been displaced, and many people are dead.
More than 100 people have died since these clashes began. Martial law has been imposed and a strict cordon of checkpoints set up to prevent additional fighters from slipping into the city as police search for militants on a most wanted list. Their main target is this man, Isnilon Hapilon. Long associated with the Philippine terror group Abu Sayyaf, Hapilon and his fighters have pledged allegiance to ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
What's happening in Mindanao is no longer a rebellion of Filipino citizens. It has transmogrified into invasion by foreign terrorists who heeded the clarion call of the ISIS to go to the Philippines.
With ISIS losing ground in Iraq and Syria, there are concerns that the predominantly Muslim island of Mindanao, long a restive part of a mostly Christian Philippine nation, is fertile ground for ISIS to gain a foothold in Southeast Asia. President Duterte has vowed he will do whatever it takes to prevent that from happening.
All right, let's bring in Maria Reza now, executive editor at Rappler, a Philippine news site. She's joining us now via Skype from the Philippine capital, Manila. Great to have you on, Maria. Thanks for joining us. So first off, just how did this city, or rather the entire island, get wrapped up in this siege? Kind of start from the beginning and take us through, because we're looking at, tens of thousands of people leaving, and it's very reminiscent of some of the scenes that we've seen in Mosul as residents there had to flee ISIS.
So first of all is to understand this is not new. This is not the first time this particular group has taken over parts of this part of Mindanao. So February last year, from February 20th to March 1, this group attacked a military camp and established 3 strongholds in Lanao del Sur. They displaced nearly 30,000 people at that point, and it took 10 days for the military to regain control. That was February. They did it again November last year, and again it took several days, so we're now on day 9. What triggered this particular one is a manhunt, the military going after Isnilon Hapilon. He's a familiar name to CNN audiences. We've been reporting on him since 2000 when he was part of a group that kidnapped foreigners and brought them to the Abu Sayyaf. So he has evolved. He's now actually allegedly both ISIS in its social media accounts and Filipinos who have pledged allegiance to ISIS call him the emir of ISIS groups in the Philippines.
So they went in to get him. This ended up in this battle that has been going on. The broader picture, Maria, and you're across all of this, when you're looking at ISIS and the sort of tentacles which are worrying a lot of people in a regional sense. You've had attacks in Indonesia, you've had attacks in Manchester, and the fear is they're going to coalesce. Tell us what the regional threat is.
What you're seeing is a new evolution of a threat that has been there since the 90s. We used to call it Jemaah Islamiyah. That is the basic network that is still there. Global authorities really nipped that threat the bud, but it evolved and became more virulent. And so ISIS is on that social network, and what you're seeing are the more extremist groups pushed out to the fringe beyond peace processes. And this group, for example, the Mauta group, the father of the two brothers was a former engineer who was a member of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. It started as part of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and then splintered when the MILF, then the largest Muslim separatist group in the Philippines, when it got involved in peace processes. And this is particularly vicious. You know, in April last year, they mimicked ISIS. They posted on Facebook 2 photos showing them, the Mauta group, beheading 2 Filipino sawmill workers dressed in orange jumpsuits, just like ISIS public executions.
Yeah, a lot of concerns about what's going on and how far it might spread and how organised it could get. Maria, our former colleague, Maria Ressa, thanks so much. Great to see you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. Well, one of Manchester's most famous residents is bringing some comfort to the city 8 days after the terror attack that killed at least 22 people. Former Oasis singer Liam Gallagher performing a benefit concert Tuesday for the victims and their families, and as you heard, their fans singing the band's famous hit Don't Look Back in anger in solidarity with those affected by the deadly bombing. Meanwhile, another benefit concert is set for Sunday. Ariana Grande will headline. The bombing, of course, came at the close of her performance last week. Other performers will include Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, Coldplay, Miley Cyrus, and Pharrell Williams. Quite the star lineup. It is. Now, Manchester authorities have not let up in their search for anyone who might be involved in the arena attack. Police searched a property in nearby Wigan earlier on Tuesday. A stretch of homes cordoned off. Police asking people to avoid the area while they investigated. Short break now here on CNN Today. When we come back, ISIS targeting the innocent and the vulnerable in Iraq, bombings at an ice cream shop and targeting pensioners. Stay with us.
Japanese Wagyu beef has such a strong reputation for its excellent quality and delicate, unique flavor. I'm privileged to be in Japan to find out what makes this beef so great.
和牛は個体識別システム、そして血統管理、格付けにより一頭一頭丁寧に愛情を込めて育てております。
Selecting the right beef is important. It's expensive, so we want to make sure we are getting authentic Japanese Wagyu. The stamp here on the package tells you that it is officially Wagyu. Just look at that excellent marbling. So right here we have one of my favorites. It's a sukiyaki, and you've got this gorgeous Wagyu beef that's been kind of laid on top. It's simmered for a few seconds.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Kind of melts in the mouth, right? It just disappears.
Oh my God.
Whether it's roast beef, steak, or the sukiyaki, you get this wonderful feeling when you eat it. You see the marbling just translates into such a wonderful flavor. Just hard to beat, you know?
Beautiful.
Because leaving home doesn't mean living less. Stay at a hotel that has the news source you trust. Stay at a CNN partner hotel.
A sigh of disbelief went up across the land. Another vote, the fourth in 3 years, but the election June 8th will be vital to determine Britain's Brexit bargaining hand and the European landscape for decades to come. So join me, Christiane Amanpour, for the run-up and all the results. CNN will be your election hub, here at the heart of British politics.
Special coverage starts on Election Day, June 8th on CNN.
I'm Ivan Watson in the Ijen volcano in Indonesia, and this is CNN.
Welcome back, everyone, to CNN Today. I'm Michael Holmes.
I'm Amara Walker. Time now to get straight to our top stories. Sources tell CNN Russian officials discussed having potentially derogatory information about Donald Trump and his aides in conversations intercepted by the U.S. during the presidential election.
But the sources cautioned the Russian claims could have been exaggerated or even made up. And we're going to show you now a rather hazy launch site in California. The U.S. military says from there it successfully shot down a mock intercontinental ballistic missile over the Pacific.
And this was the first live fire test of the upgraded interceptor. This follows a flurry of North Korean missile launches, and it's seen as a test of U.S. ability to counter a potential attack. German police say they have arrested a 17-year-old asylum seeker who they say was planning a suicide terror attack in Berlin.
They say he arrived in Germany in 2015 and actually wasn't on their radar, but they received a tip from his family that he wanted to join jihad. A third bombing on Tuesday in Iraq has killed at least 11 people and wounded 25 others, including Iraqi troops.
It happened Tuesday evening in the city of Hit, about 100 miles west of Baghdad. ISIS is claiming responsibility. Meantime, the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, still reeling from twin car bombings hours earlier that targeted the most innocent Iraqis.
At least 22 people killed in those attacks, which ISIS also says it carried out. Ian Lee with more on those tragedies.
ISIS appears to be targeting both the young and the old in this latest attack. One bomb blowing up outside of a government building where pensioners were waiting to collect their checks. Another bomb blowing up outside of an ice cream parlor where families were enjoying a sweet treat after breaking their fast during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. Eyewitnesses describing to CNN a mixture of blood and ice cream, the aftermath scene and cell phone footage with children crying. ISIS has called for an uptick in violence during Ramadan. For them, it's an auspicious month for jihad, and it's not the first time. Last year, there was an uptick of violence during Ramadan, and one bombing killed over 300 people. ISIS saying they are targeting in that attack and these attacks Shiite Muslims. Now, the Minister of Interior has said that they will hunt down the perpetrators involved in these attacks in an act of global solidarity similar to what we've seen in Belgium, in France, and in the UK. The Eiffel Tower turned off its lights to honor the victims of the Baghdad bombings. Ian Lee, CNN, Istanbul.
As the world waits and wonders if the US will pull out of the Paris climate deal, the head of the UN has a message: get on board or get left behind.
Climate change is undeniable. Climate action is unstoppable, and climate solutions provide opportunities that are unmatchable. It is absolutely essential that the world implements the Paris Agreement and that we fulfill that duty with increased ambition.
During last weekend at the G7 summit, U.S. President U.S. President Trump refused to sign a pledge to uphold the Paris carbon reduction commitments. He tweeted that he would make his final decision this week. Well, monsoon season has officially started, and heavy rainfall has already produced deadly flooding and landslides in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, now you've got a tropical cyclone moving north across Bangladesh. Following all of this for us, our own Tom Sater joining us with the details. Hey, Tom.
Hello. You know, these two countries far apart, but again, they're related due to the monsoon season, which India's meteorological department did say started on the 30th, so just yesterday, as we expected. We were worried about this area of the world here in the Bay of Bengal because of the coastline, its geographical makeup, over 700 rivers and tributaries, and of course the high population. 7 of the 10 most deadliest cyclones have occurred here in Bangladesh and Myanmar. This was a tropical cyclone. We expected to stay at tropical storm strength as it moved through. However, just before landfall early Tuesday morning near Chittagong, pointing out yesterday 4 million lived at this coastal port, it developed an eye, and so it intensified and became the hurricane or typhoon status. It got to that kind of strength. It's the first one for the entire year in the northern hemisphere to get to that sort of strength, and it's the latest for the northern hemisphere since 1995. It's been relatively quiet. We haven't had any typhoons. But I want to point out Chittagong and Cox's Bazar. Both of these areas are in Bangladesh, and the authorities said they have evacuated about 450,000 to 500,000. I want to show you some video. However, what we found out now is that even though they evacuated citizens, In Cox's Bazar, where over 200,000 Rohingya refugees live, escaping the violence from Myanmar, they didn't evacuate. They didn't send any sort of equipment or authorities to help them move. They didn't even give them the alert that the cyclone was coming. We hear this from UN peacekeepers that were actually able to get the word out. We know thousands of homes in the Cox's Bazar area have been completely destroyed. These are flimsy homes, of course. We don't know, early assessments still taking place here, how many fatalities or injuries. But again, it was due to the same monsoon rate that moves into this region. And of course, with that now lifting into southwestern areas of India, we're going to have more flash flooding to come. In Sri Lanka, unfortunately, the death toll is now up to 194, with still 100 missing.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary. Tom, thank you. Appreciate it.
And up next here on CNN Today, we're going to continue our CNN Freedom Project series, Fair Food.
We'll show you how farm workers are pressuring fast food chains and retailers to help prevent forced labour in the fields. You're watching CNN Today. We'll be right back.
Indonesia, a culture in transition. Meet the people, trying to keep traditions.
We need to educate the people, the children, because the batik is our culture.
While creating a new modern identity.
Our mission is to draw global attention to the cuisine.
The Keepers, today on CNN.
Sunday on CNN. Get a jump on the U.S. political scene with Inside Politics.
The Republican president threatened to oppose members of his own party.
Then State of the Union with Jake Tapper.
Should President Trump apologize to President Obama and to the American people?
Fareed Zakaria, GPS.
We are living through a sea change in politics.
And Connect the World with Becky Anderson.
With respect, sir, let me just stop you there for one moment. That is not the government.
Sunday on CNN.
Business is always changing. Keep up with CNN Money. Maggie Lake is live in the heart of the world's economic epicenter, New York City, tracking all the action of the stock exchanges and the big business stories from around the world. Get top analysis of market movement and a daily breakdown of financial headlines. CNN Money with Maggie Lake, tonight only on CNN.
Welcome back, everyone. It is a long way from the farm field to the table, but some of those who harvest the crops are making sure their welfare is not left behind.
In the third part of our week-long CNN Freedom Project series, Fair Food, I want to show you how some farm workers are standing up against unfair labor practices, including forced labor, and persuading major companies to join their fight. Have you ever wondered how your tomatoes get to the grocery store, or given much thought to the people who pick them? Lupe Gonzalo, a former farm worker herself, thinks about it all the time.
There are things you don't want any worker to go through, so that's why you fight for change, to create a better future for people who come after you.
Lupe now works for the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, or CIW, a grassroots anti-trafficking organization that advocates for farm worker rights and fights against forced labor in agriculture. They just wrapped up a 2-week campaign against Wendy's, one of the biggest fast food restaurants in the country. Hundreds of CIW members and supporters held protests in cities across the southeastern U.S., calling on people to boycott the fast food giant. For more than a decade, the CIW has used boycotts and protests like this one to pressure companies to sign on to its Fair Food program.
We launched the campaign for Fair Food in 2001. So it's been 16, 17 years of working to bring retailers in.
Greg Asbed is one of the co-founders of the CIW. He says they targeted the biggest fast food chains first, going after them one at a time.
The first campaign took 4 years to get Taco Bell on board. The second campaign took 2 years to get McDonald's on board. The third campaign took 1 year to get Burger King on board. I think Subway was a very quick sort of 1 month process. So you can see there was a way that it was unfolding.
Those restaurants all signed an agreement with the CIW, pledging to purchase tomatoes only from farms that follow a strict code of conduct to protect worker rights. They also agreed to pay a penny more per pound of tomatoes, money that goes directly to the low-wage farm workers as a line item bonus, in some cases doubling their paychecks.
For us, we know it's the right thing to do, and honestly, the impact on cost is nominal.
When it comes to the major grocery chains, Whole Foods Market was the first to sign on in 2008.
What you get is greater transparency to understanding how your food is produced that you're offering to your customers, and the assurance that you're making life a little easier, a little better for the people who do the hard work to produce the food that we're selling.
The Fair Food program includes mandatory worker training for all farm workers, a hotline so workers can report violations, and regular audits of the farms by an independent third party. Florida produces 90% of all tomatoes in the U.S., and today nearly every tomato farm in the state has joined the Fair Food program. The CIW's goal now is to add to its list of buyers. A major success came in 2014 when Walmart signed the agreement. Greg Asbed struggles to understand why fast food giant Wendy's refuses to join.
There's no justification. It is inexplicable at this point. The program is proven.
Wendy's says it doesn't participate because it doesn't believe that it should, quote, pay another company's employees, just as we do not pay factory workers, truck drivers, or maintenance personnel. In March, Wendy's announced an expansion to its own code of conduct by adding additional safeguards and requiring third-party reviews related to the human rights and labor practices of certain produce suppliers. Wendy's would not provide an on-camera interview, but in an email wrote, "We do not believe that joining the Fair Food program is the only way to act responsibly."
I guess I wouldn't agree with that. It's not the only way to claim social responsibility, but it is the only way to ensure it.
CIW members say they are frustrated, but not deterred. They insist on calling Wendy's a future partner.
Que tarde o temprano Wendy's va a firmar.
Sooner or later, Wendy's will come to the table and will sign the Fair Food Agreement. And then we will all be on the same side, all fighting for justice together.
And tomorrow on CNN Freedom Project, we will talk with musician Justin Dillon about his book, A Selfish Plan to Change the World. Find out how we help ourselves by helping others.
Been an amazing series. Thanks everyone for watching at CNN Today. I was getting the Twitter
Do you know
address
your name?
at CNN Today. I was.
That's Michael Holmes, everyone.
At Home
Sometimes
CNN.
he forgets his name. I'm Amra Walker. Twitter handle at Home CNN, at Amra CNN. World
It's
Sport
late.
is next.
We're out. Bye.